and probably mostly the Gamma Quadra today. So hi everybody. All right. All right, so the first question is, what are the values of the Gamma Quadra?
What do you mean? What are the names that I give? So there's harsh judgment and independence. Is that what you mean?
Yes. Well, sure.
Okay. So harsh judgment and independence, and then there's like source integrity and harsh judgment.
What is source integrity?
Well, what I mean by this is Fi values. I just have these names to refer to these concepts that are. I can
why do you
explain
use
it
that
more.
name?
Because I was trying to think of a good name, and I thought of that one. What I mean by source integrity is the types that value introverted ethics have the preference to take information unfiltered from specific sources. Characteristically, we can think about sources as people. I think we talked about this in the previous video. But a source can also be like a book or some origin of a piece of information. The source integrity chooses to or prefers to see sources as reliable and finds has the issue of finding the best reliable sources and accepting the information from them compared to source fluidity, which is that Fe valuing types don't find the individual source to be most reliable. They see all sources as variable.
Okay, so Fi basically takes the information as it is, and they judge the source based on what?
What do you mean? Well, in principle, based on anything and based on the character or quality of the information.
Quality of the information.
Or other reasons. But the judgment goes directly to the source, not towards some other factors.
So it doesn't really go toward the information, it goes towards the source.
Yes. I think that's a difficult question because the line is usually blurred in practice, but I think yes, the answer is that a judgment made about the quality of information goes to the source in principle.
Okay, in principle. And for Fe types, the alphas and the betas, the judgment would be more so toward the information and not necessarily the source.
Again, the line is very blurred in practice, and beta types can be very dynamic because the range of possible expressions of the beta quadra is very broad, and also the alpha quadra to a lesser extent.
And when you say possible expressions, what necessarily do you mean by that? That means
what I mean by that is no more complicated than that different beta types of the same types can look very different and can appear to have very different motivations for various reasons.
Internal messages also, is that
internal? What do you mean by internal messages?
Well, never mind. I don't even know. Okay, so someone asked the question, do gammas care what people think of them, generally?
Sometimes.
My answer was something like, it depends on like the type of judgment. Like gammas would judge themselves based upon what?
Do you know? What do you mean?
Like Fi, like as in harsh judgment, there will be types of judgment that the gammas have for other people and for themselves. Like they care about their character and stuff like that. And then let's just say, like, if someone was judging a gamma based upon things that the gamma did not care about, they would not necessarily really care that they were being judged by that, basically.
As a general, as a general rule towards the slant, towards the emotionality that this quadra is likely to carry, then yes, probably so. But it's not quite as universal in practice that would be true, but I would say so.
Okay, so it's not universal because people are all different.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the answer to your question, sometimes. I mean, it's a very the quadra spans a range of motivations, and individual types have different manifestations in behavior of the messages, the quadra messages that, in theory, the quadras express. Um, like when you think about, okay, do representatives of the gamma quadra care about what other people think of them? How would I put this? I don't know. For instance, I can think of a lot of instances where there are gammas that really don't care about what other people think of them, but then others that they're acknowledge, and in many cases would acknowledge that they have more self-centered motivations. Perhaps those motivations are weaker and more on the surface, and that if you dig deeper, they're gotten rid of. But I'm not going to say that there aren't existing some superficial motivations. For instance, if you examine the difference between the LIE and the SEE, or the SEE and the ILI, you can imagine in what ways the SEE is more other focused.
Because they're more focused on external demands.
That's maybe, but it's not really the way I was thinking of it. The way I was thinking of it is that they're focused on the other agents in the environment around them a lot more than, for instance, the ILI or sometimes the LIEs, and so they pay attention to. When we think about what is an external demand, what is the source of an external demand? Is it from the self or from the other? Then the external demand suggests that it has something to do with response to the environment, even though it's also from the self. So depends on the specific goals that, say, an SEE or maybe an ESI would have in a particular situation. They can be responsive to the attention of other people, for instance. Sometimes this is true of the SEs. They're sometimes thought of as attention whores. Other types are also thought of as attention whores in various reasons. But for instance, that's a thing.
Yeah, it is a thing. Definitely is a thing. I know a lot of SEEs are like, according to me, and I would say it's definitely a thing. Okay, so what distinguishing features would, I don't know what that means. What expressions would separate the gamma extroverts and the gamma introverts?
They're blurred in practice. I'd say that the gamma extroverts have lesser harsh judgment and are generally more accepting of the environment surrounding them, especially the SEE, where the harsh judgment appears in practice and not always on the surface.
Mm-hmm. And that would be
sorry.
That would be similar with LIE, also, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
Somewhat less so, but I agree.
Okay.
These are not hard and fixed rules. I don't think there's any real reason why these rules are. They're just things I observe in practice, making contrasts between the types as I observe them. And it relates also, if you think about the SEE as the attention whore, as I said, really what you can think about the attention whore as a quadra value in the sense that the attention whore is individualistic. Usually the people that I'm trying to caricature are very socially outgoing and socially accepting on the surface, but then in the moment they come to be very angry at people, or there's a lot of conflict or drama that arises in the moment, and at these times the attention whore variant of SEE, shall we say, becomes relatively unresponsive to the social needs of other people, taking precedence for their own individual needs. So this is an aspect of the individualism of the Quadra.
Mm-hmm.
The extroverts have greater entrepreneurial spirit, if you will, and have more expression of independence. I would say it's true as a rule. Especially independence. Independence has this dual meaning, where I mean it in the terms of the Quadra values to mean the strictly speaking, the view that situations should not generalize. That it is inappropriate to conclude that a rule generalizes based on insufficient evidence.
Right.
But the the meaning of this also
The meaning of the
translates
independence.
to, yes, it also translates to independence in a more colloquial sense and impatience. The
Yeah.
extroverted gamma types are more impatient than the introverts.
Yeah. Would you say that has to do with a lesser attention to NI, or more attention on SE?
Well, I mean, sure, you can think of it in this way. The LIE does not have in theory, a great inattention to introverted intuition, but
Mm-hmm.
it's true to say that the extroverted gamma types basically emphasize TE and SE, and the introverted gamma types emphasize the other two, this is true of all of the quadras.
Yeah. Okay. So one thing that distinguishes the extroverts and the introverts from this quadra is that the gamma extroverts are more impulsive, or not impulsive, but demanding in a way, and more impulsive, I guess. And the gamma introverts, in contrast, are more thoughtful, more focused on their internal world.
Sure. I don't disagree with what you said.
Okay, but that's not specifically what you meant. But
well, I mean, it isn't. Those are very general words to describe people. They're not probably specific to the gamma quadra either, but I don't disagree with the words you said.
right. Okay. Okay. We had a question from Greg Scorso, who he hangs out on World Socionics Society sometimes. He brought up the question, do you think that the gamma types have idiosyncratic social preferences, as in they, maybe because of the individualism, they don't like doing like formal group gatherings that have to do with, say, weddings, ceremonies, holidays, things like that? Would you say that's true, more of those types than of the other quadras?
There are a couple of themes embedded in that question, and I don't know if you've translated the question faithfully, but the gist of the question, I would say absolutely yes. If you think about gamma independence, so one way of thinking about it, in alpha you have positive emotionality, which is the emotionality of the occasion, right? I don't know, I have an image in my head of a cheery dude in a Santa Claus outfit, throwing presents at kids. All of this has to do with extroverted ethics and introverted sensorics. I think that the specific festivity, the specific mood that is supposed to be conjured by any particular occasion does have to do with Fe and Si, and gammas are relatively inattentive to it, to a greater or lesser degree than others. the part of the reason here is that, okay, so I mean, you think about several things, and how exactly should I put this? I would say that there is, in the gamma quadra types, and especially the gamma NTs, who have less, of more consciously rejected, shall we say, extroverted ethics and introverted sensation, express independence, and part of that is a rejection of the idea that for no particular reason that things should be done in a particular way.
So
do you see where the connection comes in? Or to generalize, when I say independence, what I mean, most strictly speaking, is that there's an unwillingness to generalize from a particular rule to other occasions, right? Everything should be justified with its own particular evidence. So let's take the statement, I don't know, that because it is Christmas, you should spend time with your family and give people presents. But there is no evidence to support this rule. There is no reason except that other people say that it should be this way, and they say, "Oh, I like Christmas, and I like getting bombarded with fucking Christmas commercials in August."
oh my God.
All of which is, I think, strictly speaking, if interpreted with the independence of any rules, makes no sense.
Okay.
I also think that, so in strictly speaking, there's just that just means it makes no sense. But I think that also many gammas, especially the gamma NTs, find it very irritating.
Okay. I would say that there's a tendency for the socialite types, the SCE and the ESIs, to like comply with these standards just because it's what just because it's what the people that they have relationships are doing or whatever.
Yeah, but the emphasis of gamma types is to form meaningful relationships with the individuals or sources involved.
Okay.
So the sources involved, there's like, I don't know, imagine that it's just like a contract between the individuals involved. And
okay. Yeah. No, that makes plenty of sense.
There's a preference in some way to accept that this. I think that there is an orientation towards trying to remember even the things that are meaning. Like, so there's also this rule that says on your birthday you should go do things and give people presents and stuff like this. By the way, I don't tell people my birthday at all. Like, if you ask for what my birthday is, I won't tell you. The only time I give out my birthday is when I go to the Department of Motor Vehicles and have to fill out a form or something like that.
Okay, so when is your birthday?
In 2015, I had a birthday, or we'll have a birthday. One of those two.
Okay, so
my birthday was in 1990. That was when my birthday was.
Okay, there's also an emphasis on contracts, though, on verbal contracts or verbal commitments to other people.
Well, no, that's not what I mean, really. I just imagine a relationship. Imagine a relationship with just some transfer of emotional bonding with some other person. So you can imagine, and I agree with you. What you said is that the gamma SF sometimes uphold these contracts without paying attention as much to the idea that this rule is stupid, because they see, okay, well, I don't know, my good friend has a birthday coming up on some day. I want to show my friend that I support them. So I'll go and buy like a $300 toaster oven and give it to them, because that's what people do on their birthdays. And also lace it with socks.
Socks.
I'm trying to make fun of what people do on their birthdays because it doesn't make sense.
Okay, so I also think it doesn't make sense. I do comply just because if you don't, people are going to say, "Oh, well, you don't love me,"
Well, this is the thing that what I'm saying about contracts is that I feel that gamma types prefer to have the sort of the spoken emotional understanding that this relationship is based on these emotional bonds and has nothing to do with this other shit that some people would consider very important.
Yeah. Okay, so
This is what Peter Bartle has talked about as being the preference between. He talks about it between TI dominance and TE dominance and FI dominance, but I think it's most specific to the LIE and ESI to have this robotic interaction where the emotions of both parties are stated clearly to both parties and are well understood, and then there's no need to go and like bitch at each other or have a lot of drama unnecessarily about these things. It's much preferred to just have it be robotic. Whereas there are some other types that would look at these interactions and say, that is way too sterile. I would never be comfortable with an emotional connection that was as sterile as that.
yes, as a gamma, I completely understand that.
I think it's a little different for ILI and SEE, but
How so?
not dissimilar.
How so?
It's more spontaneous.
Okay. Yeah, okay, well, that does make sense. So basically, probably with the SEE, the emotional expressions are really varied and can go very high and low compared to the other people in that quadras. Would you say that's correct?
Say more what you mean.
The emotional expression of the SEE can be very intense. I'm sure that's true with the ESI as well, but I don't actually know that.
Yes, I would agree that the emotional expression of the SEE can be variably intense.
Okay. So do you think that's part of the reason why there's the difference in interaction with the irrational gammas?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so someone had a question about relationship production. I think we actually have already talked on that, and I don't have really a specific way to ask that. There are some other.
Relationship production. How do relationships form?
How does the expression or the non-traditional preferences affect, or the individualism also affect the creation of relationships? It's kind of an in-depth question. It probably touches a lot.
Well, I mean, yes, we certainly did address something of this form. You appear to be muted.
Yes. Do you think it's hard for this question? I don't know. Do you think it's hard for other types to relate to the individualism of the gammas? Does it cause problems in interaction between other types? Probably specifically the alphas.
Sure, sometimes. I mean, you said alphas, yes. I think there are some occasions where alpha types and sometimes beta types fail to appreciate the aforementioned sterility, which gammas often approach their interactions with people and it can lead to various different circumstances, but I think there's a common attitude in the Fe egotypes, particularly, to see the world more brightly, which is specific, yes, to alpha Fe egotypes, but I've also seen it in IEIs, which makes them have some difficulty in understanding the origins of individualism. But there are also, I think, to varying extents, other members of other quadras can observe and understand and appreciate the processes that undergo this more sterile way of approaching the world. It depends on the circumstances, right? Some people are better at understanding other people than other people,
Mm-hmm.
and so on.
Do you think the extroverts in the Quadra are better at understanding people, or do you think it is the SFs? Because the only thing that I could find in the
gamma types, you mean? Which of the gamma types are better at understanding people?
Yeah, would you say it would be the extroverts, or would you say it was the gamma SFs?
I don't know. I wouldn't say any of them.
Oh, you don't think any of them are good at understanding people?
Well, I don't think it's specific. I think all
Okay.
of them come from different. They all have marginally different motivations, and different people from other quadras have different motivations that may be more or less, with respect to understanding gamma types, may be more or less appreciative of what is going on, and vice versa also.
Okay.
I would go out on a limb and say that just the gamma type that is least skillful at navigating the world of people is the LIE, but even this has much more variance.
Mm-hmm.
I say this mainly because I think this type is often phenomenally unskilled at navigating the world of people, in my experience.
I think
But again, it
phenomenally
has
is actually a good word for
high
that,
variance.
because of the social well, according to the literature, the social blunders, the LIE is probably more extroverted and more likely to interact with people more often than the ILI, right?
In
Or more
various ways, sure.
Okay, so their ability to create social blunders.
That's not really
higher.
what I mean, but
Oh, okay.
okay. It's a possible reason, but it's not. I don't really think it's what I mean.
Okay. Would it be because of like maybe the low FI?
Yes, but not exclusively. So, for instance, I wouldn't say that. Yes, it is. I wouldn't say that the same thing applies to the LSE, for instance. I think that what sometimes happens with this type, and I emphasize again, there's high variance, is that this type becomes so focused on its goals in a way that the LSE is not as easily focused on its goals, even though the LSE also is somewhat focused on the goals because they have demonstrative SE. But the LIE sort of becomes single-mindedly focused on their goal. And in some situations becomes so absorbed in their relationships with people that they easily lose sight of They easily lose sight of what things in their life will satisfy them, and
Okay.
I'll put it in this way. It's a type that actually you often see in movies. You see that sometimes there might be variation, and you could argue about some of the specific examples, but there's often a variant of a greedy capitalist character that has no idea how to relate to people and no idea how to no idea what they really want out of life, other than they have a successful business or something like this, and they're good at dealing with people in order to make lots of money. But in the movies, right, you can think of examples of movies where like they also have a love interest and they expect the love interest to just like be there, and they don't think about them any more than that. And I wouldn't say that's true of LIEs, but they may have a tendency to not really understand what is going on in the mind of other people that they try to relate to. And so broadly, I think it's a reasonable caricature of LIEs to say that they don't often understand what they want. And I've seen representations of this type of character that I think are exactly this type in real life as well. Very, very successful business people that have very little, that have train wrecks of a personal life and don't really understand what they want. But again, there are other LIEs that are not like that.
I have a friend who couldn't choose between LIE and ILI. But without naming any names, one expression that I noticed that it did seem kind of more similar to LIE was the inability to decide what the person wanted to get out of life. So I could say that I've actually seen that expression.
I don't know if that's a very didactic set of. This is a didactic subject for the public.
What does that word mean? I'm sorry.
I don't know that there is much pedagogical value continuing the conversation about a friend you have.
Oh yeah.
That I also don't know.
Okay, that was just that was just a random fact. I have no intention.
There are other types that can also not know what they want to get out of life. I just think that it seems.
Well, there's no way of either one of us proving whether that's whatever type. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so this is a common topic. Back to the harsh judgment. What would be the difference between the harsh judgment and the not harsh judgment of delta, or forgiveness judgment? What do you call that? I'm sorry.
Good faith judgment.
Good faith judgment. Okay. What are the main differences between those types of judgment? It seems obvious, but
yes. If you understand what those definitions mean, then it seems obvious. What I would say is that the harsh judgment is the feeling that other people are bad, that other people have bad character, and that the individual, the self, should stay away from the people with bad character. The good faith judgment is attentive towards the character of others, but focuses on the potential character rather than the currently realized character. So the preference is to see other people as not being bad people, but being in some set of circumstances that has not yet led to the realization of their potential to have whatever strengths are characteristic of that person. And there is much more to say about the complexities of that attitude as there are with, say, harsh judgment.
Yeah, we could talk more about that maybe in the next video. Talk about deltas, because I can't say that I really know much about that quadra, really. Um, okay, I'm going to move on to another question. Oh yeah. What do you think about the term that's used in a lot of the literature that ESIs and other gammas term people as evil? Like, do you think that is an accurate way to say that? The word evil.
I would and said for a long time that in harsh judgment, I think there's an assessment of other characters as being bad, and the preference to move away from the bad people. I
Bad
don't know.
because their character is just bad, or bad because it'll bring them negative returns?
Both of these things, right? There's an assumption, additionally, that dealing with people who are bad is not a good idea.
Okay.
I guess that assumption is somewhat context dependent, but I think that the Gamma Quadra types are relatively context insensitive compared to other people, right? So that, I mean, you're not necessarily going to like not get a sandwich at the store because the cashier is a bad person. That interaction is quite distant. But I think that in a lot of interactions where there's a little bit more narrowing of psychological distance than that,
Is this a good
is
example?
relatively context insensitive.
Okay.
Gamma
Is
types,
this?
yeah,
Sorry. Go ahead.
that gamma types are relatively less context sensitive. They
Less
tend to
context sense.
overestimate the penalties that they may incur for dealing with
Oh, okay.
bad people, even in relatively innocuous situations. Not as
Okay.
innocuous as like a cashier at the store, but like some reasons.
Is it a good example to say that, say you knew this landlord and you were going to rent from them, but you knew like they were an alcoholic and you didn't want to have to deal with that person?
It
So
would make
you,
more sense in the reverse order. Like, what is a landlord going to do in the is a problem? But like you, let's say that you have a tenant that I
uh-huh.
think that a lot of people would be concerned about this kind of thing. To be fair, it's not a great example
Oh.
of a situation that would be contrastive,
Mm-hmm.
but
Okay.
you know, there could be a situation like not in getting to and being in an agreement with a prospective tenant that is a bad person, but something kind of similar, right? You might choose to do business with a client that you know is just going to cause problems for you or something like this.
So other people would look over that?
Um,
Or they're just not as
they
good as
might,
noticing
well, they
those
might,
things?
yes, I would say that's true. They might not be as good as noticing that.
Okay.
They also might not be, they might be more pathetically persuaded. Well, I mean pathetically in the sense of the origin of the term, as in pathos, that the individual in question has changed themselves or something similar, and is will not cause problems in the future because they understand what they were doing and so on like that.
Okay. Basically, they are, first of all, not as attentive to that sort of information, and second of all, if they are, they're more forgiving and more likely to
I mean,
what?
some people, right? So, for instance, you can imagine that
Maybe the LSI not so much.
yeah, sure. Although the LSI can be very pathetical,
Oh yeah,
um,
yeah.
but they're probably not innately forgiving.
Mm-hmm.
Although again, this is a type with a broad range of expressions.
Okay. Um, how's the gamma rate on there? Do they have a broad range of expressions, or are they less so?
They have a less broad range of expressions than Fe valuing types, I would say. But as I think all of them have it's true if you were to say that all of the quadras have a broad range of expressions, but the quadra that has the broadest range of expressions is the beta quadra, in my view.
How different, I can't remember who asked this question, but how different can two people of the same type be? Just trying to find, oh yeah, that was Andrew.
I don't know, they could be different. I don't know how to answer that question. There's no measuring device for that.
There's no measuring device. Okay, so let me think about
Especially in the beta quadra, they can sometimes be very different.
Can they be so different to as never mind. Okay. Okay. Also a question from Andrew. Does type have anything to do with successful long-term marriage after 30 years?
I don't know. I haven't been married for 30 years.
Okay. All right. So.
I mean, I know Peter has a stance on that question.
Yeah.
I don't really have a stance on that question. I don't think I've made enough observations.
Okay, that's the honest answer. I could probably answer that somewhat, but I don't think it's. I don't know. Honestly, like the intertype relation that I've seen last the longest is, I actually know no duals, but semi-duals is the longest relationships that I've seen. But I've only typed like a few couples, so. Okay, so is self-sufficiency a gamma characteristic or motivation?
Well, it's a delta characteristic the way I speak of it, but there's a certain degree of independent-mindedness that is sometimes interpretable as something that looks like self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency in a colloquial sense, but the way that I usually mean it is the disposition to use the resources available at hand to solve some problem in front of you. And the gamma types are less attentive to the problems, the physical problems in front of them sometimes, than the delta types are, certainly.
So that would bring down their self-sufficiency because they would rely on or allow other people to do things for them because they're not attentive to it, possibly.
Yes, sometimes that's definitely true.
Yeah. Okay.
I think there's a range of variance. Some people would complain at me about saying that, but I think it's correct in principle.
So deltas are more self-sufficient than gammas.
I mean, we're using this colloquial term, and by this colloquial term, this term, I mean something very specific, which, as I said, the orientation to use resources immediately available to solve problems immediately in front of you, whereas gamma types are not necessarily focused on resources immediately available and not necessarily focused on problems immediately in front of them. Now, that's what I mean when I say self-sufficiency in the context of these quadra themes, because it's one of the quadra themes that I described, but there are other ways of interpreting that question. I'm just trying to make that clear.
Clear, yeah. Okay, so you said gammas are not always attentive to fixing the problems that are immediately in front of them. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. Why? Or what is it that they are more focused on than that? Or what is it that gets in the way of them being more focused on those things?
Well, I mean, in the way that I see quadra values, and if you're attentive to introverted intuition, there's limiting possibilities. Is a view of the world, especially in NI dominance, a view of the world, the physical world around you, as relatively irrelevant to your experience. Your experience is relatively intransigent to the physical surroundings. It's more in the Ni dominant, there's a mental representation, and in the gamma, and also I guess the beta, but more the gamma spirit is to see the world around you as what you make of it. And so, is it clear why that expression is viewing the world around you as what you make of it precludes always being attentive to the immediately present problems in the world around you?
So
in philosophical terms, I think that makes perfect sense, and in principle, I think that it can be seen to be true. Is that there are, especially in gamma NTs, can be relatively insensitive to the physical world around them.
Would you say that it's true that the
or apathetic about it? Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so the gamma NTs are basically apathetic to their physical surroundings.
More than other types.
More than other types. Okay, so they're not completely apathetic.
Especially, well, so the Ni dominant is the most apathetic and is the origin, and I understand and kind of agree with the criticisms of the way that I've framed what is world rejectingness, to say that this is really a concept that applies well for the Ni dominant, that really takes the view that the world is of no great importance, and the things in the world that are of importance are not the physical mundane surroundings of the world. And that for instance, the SE dominant, it makes somewhat less sense. And I think that I agree that criticism is true. I just don't have a way of framing it much better than that. So there's a certain tendency. I think that the Ni dominant type really is the apathetic type, and that the other types, to some degree, share that mindset, but not as truly.
Okay.
ESI also shares that mindset to some extent.
People have expressed it like the world is inherently wrong, or needs to be fixed, or isn't perfect, or okay. So I basically
that's not an Ni dominant formulation. That's the alternate formulation for, say, the SE dominant or the SE mobilizing type, where they want to get whatever they want in the world, and the world is not meeting their needs at the present time.
Okay, so
and that's right. You can think of this. The LIE is a type that is not very sensitive to the idea that they could use the immediately present resources around them to deal with problems that they may or may not see as problems. They don't see, for instance, the fact that this room isn't well furnished. That isn't a problem to them usually, most typically, right? They look at the room for what is the functional. Is this room functioning or not? Is it serving its purpose? And not for, oh, the decor should be different, or I shouldn't leave this papers on the table because somebody else doesn't like it that way. And when they encounter problems, physical problems in the world, for the functional importance of which they respect, this is a type that's insensitive to their own their industry of working with their hands with the resources available to solve this problem. It's a type that much prefers, in principle, as greedy capitalists that make lots of money sometimes, to hire somebody else to deal with the mundane problems that they experience, rather than having to figure out how to deal with it with their own hands. But that's only true to a limited degree. right? It's also a type. This is also a type in practice that tends to be quite frugal, as are a lot of the TE ego types. So that is another thing that is sometimes people complain at me about for saying that. It's true in principle. It's not always true in practice, I think.
Okay. All right. So we had a few other questions, but most of these aren't necessarily that helpful for this setting. I'm actually going to have to end the video here. We might be able to add some more later and edit it in. But
Okay.
all right. Thank you for doing this, and I'll talk to you in a little bit.
See you later.
Bye.